Hi, everybody. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes to have everybody join us. Let me turn off the microphone on my other monitor. We're just going to wait a couple more. And also, while we're waiting, if you can chat in some of your questions, I'll be sure to answer them. I'm actually going to take a break in the middle and start answering the questions, so you don't have to wait till all the way to the end. So if there's something on your mind already, do chat those in, and my moderator, Vavara, will help me capture those. So I'll be sure to answer them since we have the full hour. And that way I can do a more extensive Q&A with you guys. So again, let us know what your questions are, and we'll be sure to answer them. And if I don't, keep chatting them in then, okay? And also, do let me know if somehow the video or the slides are not working, or if you need me to explain a slide a little better, I can also do that. Because like I said, we actually have 60 minutes here. So I'll be sure to take time to answer questions and also to try to explain the slides better if they're not making sense to you. And yeah, we're going to wait a couple more minutes for people to join us. And so if you want to, why don't you guys chat in where you're dialing in from, just so I know where everybody is at. I know the invitation went out far and wide, so I'll be glad to see where you're all joining the webinar from. And yeah, today's presentation, the bulk of it will be on strategic networking, but I also spend a little bit more time, like I said, answering questions. And then if there's time left, I can kind of quickly go over the personal branding part also and share some more tips where it's appropriate. And like I said, the more you can interact with me via chat, the better I can directly answer those questions and provide you with some more interaction. Okay, so let me take a quick look. So how do I develop a strategic network? Yes, we're definitely going to get into that, and also talk more about the important people in those strategic network and how do you build a connection with them. Okay, and I see probably San Diego will be the the main location, I think, since most of the students are located here for now, I think. And I know I have some alum that indicated they'll be joining us also. And yeah, definitely, I want to take the time to answer questions. So like I said, if the slides you have questions on, or some basic networking, personal branding question you would like me to answer, or thinking about how to reboot your career, I can definitely talk some more about that also. And yes, this is definitely more of a career planning type of webinar where I can help you think about where it is you want to go, because really strategic networking is about building your future and building those connections that you need to either get a new job or build a company or leverage yourself into a new function. So a couple more minutes and then we can get started. Hi, Mitchell. I see you're there. Great to see you. I'll take probably just another minute or two. So again, thanks for letting me know where you're chatting in from. And definitely let me know specific questions, because I do want to use this part, this 1 hour webinar, to answer more specific questions and also give you more tips based on what I've learned over my career, and also some of the things that I've gotten from Harvard Business Publishing about networking and also just leadership and career planning in general. So yes, do chat those in and let me know, what type of questions you have for today's webinar. Let me take a look at the chat. Okay, for startup founders, definitely. I'll try to answer that too as we go along. And definitely for people who are thinking about new careers, I can answer some more about that too. And also just the basics of what a strategic network looks like. Okay, so let me get going on the slides. I know people can always join us via the recording too. So this is going to look a little funky. It's going to be like an infinity screen before I jump into the slide. So bear with me a second. And here are the slides. So yeah, today I want to talk to you more about strategic networking. And actually, this is one of the graphics that I used for a talk I gave earlier in the year at Launch Bio. And it was actually targeted towards entrepreneurs and some of the grad students. And so basically, I'm giving you my take on what a strategic network is and why that's so important, and also to distinguish it a little bit more in terms of what it can do to help with your career. So I'm going to get started on looking at what today's going to look like. So in this webinar, I definitely want to distinguish to you what are some of the different types of network, and also talk to you more about why it is that you need a strategic network. And also to distinguish a little bit more about what a resource network is versus what an idea network is. And also some of the benefits of why it is you need a strategic network and why it's important to have it to launch your company, your brand, and to really increase your visibility. And then at the end, if we have time, I can, again, go over a little bit more about how to polish your personal brand so that you are ready to be visible to your network, right? Once you build this network, you also want to make sure that your personal brand is ready to go so that people can see you and know where to go based on your expertise and in your skills. And again, keep typing in the questions. I'll make sure Bavara, my moderator, will capture those questions for me so I can answer them along the way. So I want to show you, basically it's a history lesson. And many of you that did spend time in the US in terms of learning American history or have heard stories about how the colonial Americans fought against the British may have heard of this guy named Paul Revere. And he was basically the person that sounded the alarm about the British coming to invade Boston. So in this map, I was actually just in the East Coast recently. So in this map, it basically shows you Boston Harbor over here on the right. And then the British, the invaders, are the ones in the red horses. And so Paul Revere is basically the person that rode along this blue map, this blue path along northern Boston to warn all the other colonial Americans that are fighting against the British, right? And then, in actual fact, there are two other people that actually tried to warn the colonialists. And there's William Dawes in this green route, who actually rode along South Boston across Cambridge over to Lexington, Concord. And then there's even a third guy named Dr. Samuel Prescott. And as you've seen in here, that the red horses, they were from Concord, and they are also coming into Boston very close. So somehow Paul Revere is the person most remembered for warning the Americans, right? And so as you can see that William Dawes in the green route and Paul Revere in the blue route, they rode pretty similar distances, in fact, right? And then even William Dawes, I'd say he rode even further, because he went all the way to Concord and started out in Boston Harbor Central. And basically, you know, you had two people who rode similar distances, made similar numbers of stops, but somehow Paul Revere is the only guy that's remembered for this deed. So my next chart, I want to show you how their networks look like, right? And Paul Revere on the upper right had, like I said, a northern route, but similar numbers of stops. But in his case, the people he stopped to warn, to tell about the British invasion, were able to tell other people. So his network was very open, and then the message got on to more and more people, right? Looking at this chart, you can see that illustrated pretty clearly. But then on the right-hand side, right-hand bottom, you see William Dawes. So again, he made similar numbers of stops, just about as long as distance, if not longer. But then the people that he warned were all part of the same network, right? So they all kind of ended up just telling each other. And so this is more of a closed network, William Dawes, whereas Paul Revere has more of an open network. And that is what's key about somebody like Paul Revere being able to be remembered for this special ride that he did to warn the Americans against the British invasion, right? So the open network, basically it's like a viral effect, right? The open network allows you to spread the information to more people. William Dawes, unfortunately, had a close network and therefore didn't get to as many people. And that gets me to this next chart to, again, tell you more about the 3 types of network. And I'm not going to go over the operational network or personal network as much. Basically, for operational networks, just think of them as people that help you to get your job done. So typically, people in an operational network is close because they tend to all know each other or work in the same team. And then in the personal network, I think, again, inherently you understand that it's more people in your family or friends, and yes, and family and friends, and also could be people in your professional group or alumni group, right? Family, friends, alumni groups, etc. And then strategic network would be where you have, this is your future looking network, right? This is where you get stakeholders, you get sponsors, and these are the people that can help you cross lateral and vertical boundaries and into other functions or into other units, or maybe even get you further to resources. So let me switch back to looking at some of your questions. So let's go back where I can go back to the video. Okay, so let's have a look. Yeah, so we basically, in looking at those 3 types of network, if you're somebody who's an entrepreneur, your strategic network is probably trying to look for financial resources or media resources, or maybe even an entrepreneur network that can help you make connections to other people that you need to know, right? An innovation network, perhaps. And also, I think for people trying to leverage into a different career, you're rebooting or revamping your career, basically you have to look at your strategic network as a way to move into a new field, or look at, like I said, functional. So it could be that you're learning a new skill or new function. So you might want to get to know people in that new field, or you also might want to think more about the new field you want to get into. So what are some associations or organizations that you can volunteer at or participate in so that you can, access those resources, right? So any questions I can take here while we're taking the first Q&A break. And then I'll go back to explaining more about the idea network versus a resource network. And then we can go on to more tips about how to better build that strategic network. So let me take a few minutes here to stop and see if you have any questions so far. And yes, I think when you think about personal network, there's no reason why somebody in your personal network can't be in your strategic network. But it's just that when you're starting out, typically your operational network and your personal network tend to be closed loops, right? They tend to be close-knit circles where there aren't too many other, like, Paul Revere's network, right? Where it was people that all know different people and were able to spread the information further out. So that's why typically there's not a lot of overlap between operational network, personal network, into a strategic network. And as I said, because many of you are either entrepreneur or trying to go into a new field, or a student that's brand new in a field, that's why your strategic network tends to be thinner or smaller, right? And that's why I want to emphasize that there tends not to be a lot of overlap between the personal, the operational into your strategic network. And this is why we need to talk more about how to build it and to think about what that looks like, to be very intentional about building out that strategic network. Okay, so let me switch back to the slides and we can finish up on the explanation about idea network versus resource network, which is an important distinction also. Okay, so let's switch over back to the next. Okay, so let me do the idea network first, and then we'll go back to why it's important. So when you look at an idea network, so I'm trying to distinguish between an idea network versus a resource network, right? So an idea network, I think many of the people in the science field understand this very well. It might be a poster session. It might be a scientific conference. And basically, you're trying to test out your new ideas, right? You either have a surprising new idea or different take on an old perspective or old theory, or maybe you're just trying to have other people social proof your idea, right? You're trying to bring out this brand new idea and you have people either with similar research interests or different types of experts that are in these conferences to kind of help verify whether your work is really valid or interesting. So that idea network can be another type of network, right? But then when we think about students and entrepreneurs and people who are rebooting their career, you also want to think more about these resource networks. And so the way these resource networks work is that they're the people that can get you either the financial resources, or they can get you the contacts or referrals, or they can even help you buy or sell your company, right? So the resource network is, again, how, like many of you are thinking about it, whether that's switching a career or going into, business for yourself, or even trying to switch to a new function altogether, right? So the resource network you need may be people that are already in your field, but more likely they're people who have the resources and the power to make those connections, or even access to the money or media contacts, etc., right? So think about how, whether you participated in idea networks before, but more importantly, your strategic network is your resource network, right? Whether you need to hire people, you need to get funding, you need to get connections into a new company you're interested in, and so forth, right? So it's very people intensive. So based on that, I also want to make use of some of the internet and also network theory that I've talked about in class. So looking at the diagram on the left, I think probably you understand that when it's just two people on the telephone talking to each other, so the first one, with two people talking, you can only make one connection, right? But then further along, as you get 5 telephones talking to one another, now you have 10 different connections. And then even further, if you have 12 people added to your network, you now can make up to 66. So you can definitely see the exponential effect, right? By adding more and more people to your network. And LinkedIn is a perfect example of how this network theory plays out, right? Many times you see LinkedIn, it says, oh, this person is a friend of a friend, right? That's a 2nd degree. Or it's a friend of a friend of a friend, which is 3rd degree. So in this type of network, it is very important to know as many people as you can so that you can create a bigger network. But similarly, it's not just important to make as many nodes as possible, it's also important to connect to people who are, just like back to the Paul Revere example, who know people far and wide, right? So people that are far and wide are the key influencers, I want to call them. The key influencers are the people that you want to make connections with. And so why is that important? Well, thinking about how you can, make your messages heard or get connections into important networks, you can find these strategic influencers, or key influencers, I should call them. You can find these key influencers in your own network and thinking about, gee, well, who are the people that, everybody knows at UCSD International Student Group? And that, I would say that's Mindy, right? Mindy, somebody that everybody's know, and she is a key influencer because she knows all the students coming in and out. And so she tends to be somebody who can make connections amongst students or amongst teachers or amongst teachers and students. And same is true with another program director like Fiona. Fiona does a lot of the business and management classes. Fiona O'Donnell Lawson is also a key influencer in that she knows all the teachers and then she enrolls all the different students. And so she also can kind of connect amongst different teachers and connect amongst different alumni and students, right? And the resource I want to tell you guys about is this book called Friend of a Friend by David Burkus. This book just came out because it's important. Like I said, it's not always easy to connect to an influencer because you're either second degree or third degree away, right? So it's very important that you can get introduction. So let me switch the video so I can answer this better. So let's go back to my video and let me answer that better. Yeah, so basically, if you have, these key influencers, and in thinking about how I want to connect with them, like I said, David Burkus's book gives you some ideas about how to either writing an introduction email or ways of making introduction about yourself and of your friends so that you can make those connections easier, make them happen more easily and not be so awkward. Because I think I said in the lunch webinar that sometimes networking gets a bad name because people just feel like they're in a room full of strangers and they're just exchanging business cards for, endlessly and not really making good connections. And so I think what you want to do, like I said, is being strategic about who are the people you want to get to know and then how you can be helpful to them so that they can be helpful to you. So I'm going to give some more tips about that. So let me answer some of the questions that just came through. So are idea and resource network examples of strategic networks? I would say those of you that are entrepreneurs, students, and people who are rebooting your career, your strategic network is more like a resource network because you're trying to find people that can get you into a new function or get you the financial resources or get you the additional referrals that you need to find the people that you need to connect with. And idea networks, I would say, is more applicable to the scientist population that I talk to. So the scientist population need to find good reviewers or good academic sponsors for their ideas. So that's strategic to them, right? But to you, this audience anyways, I think it's more about, like I said, financial resources, media resources, people resources, right? People that can connect you to the right people, and then to think more about crossing functional barriers or crossing into another field altogether. So do you think using LinkedIn is a good way to develop strategic network? Okay, well, this is kind of a loaded question. I think LinkedIn is a good way to research people. So let me give you the example about, so recently I gave a video interview with Magdalena Yasio, who's the first founder of Salesforce.com. So I don't know her. She's not even a third degree connection. And the way I found her was I heard a podcast that she did. And she just wrote a book called Power Up, if you saw the video. So her book is about empowering women and actually men too in the tech industry. And I read the book and thought about some of the key ideas that I really liked. And then I found her on Facebook and just messaged her saying, hey, I teach at UCSD. I really like those ideas. Is there any way I could talk to her some more about it and maybe even do a guest interview? And fortunately, she kindly said yes. And I think the reason why that worked is because we connected on the idea level, right? Because her book was just published and she's trying to gain more audience. And by me coming along to say, hey, you know, your idea is great. It really resonated with me. And I can really use that to connect with my students. And that's why I think that connection worked. And so when I think about entrepreneurs, I would say do your research on LinkedIn. Do your research in terms of, who are the people that are really active in X and Y field? Or if you're trying to look for a new job position, look at the companies you want to get into. And you can easily do that in LinkedIn, right? In your search, like, oh, look for, Qualcomm, or look for Illumina, or even smaller company. And then when that company pops up, it shows you, oh, here are all the 50 employees that work for company XYZ, right? And if they are connected to you, it'll say second degree or first degree or third degree. So obviously, first degree, it's great to just call up somebody that you already know. Second degree would require you to probably, first degree, you're already connected. Second degree, you'll have to make an introduction, right? And then third degree, that's where David Burkus's book is really helpful to have your friend of a friend help you make that introduction. And so I haven't found that to be too effective using the third degree introduction. But like I said, what has worked for me is to connect with people on their ideas. And also, I think in a big company, I've said this tip before to some of my students at Illumina. One of them mentioned that, oh, they were going to make the connection with the top executives by playing dodgeball because the executives always play dodgeball. And so apparently the winning team gets to play the top executive team and therefore gets to spend time with them. And I would say, sure, that's one way, right? To connect with people either on a hobby or sport, some other field. But I would say try to look for initiatives that top executive is really passionate about. So these days it could be Me Too, or it could be racial bias in the case of Starbucks. And so whoever the VP or CEO that's behind that initiative cares very deeply about that issue, right? And I think if there's a way you can give them feedback either via email or stop by their office, telling them, hey, I went to the Starbucks training. Here are some of the great things that I saw, but here are some additional things that I think we can work on. And I think those are ways to make that connection, to really hone in on the initiatives that are important to those people. And then for the entrepreneurs, here's some other interesting idea I heard about. So I know one of the entrepreneur boot camps mentioned that everybody that goes to boot camp has to know how to kite surf. And again, normally I wouldn't just, pick up kite surfing, at my age, right? That'd be something tough to do. But I do know with different groups of venture capital or different groups of entrepreneurs, there are usually some shared hobby or topics that they really like to get together and talk about. So I think there are ways to get into those groups, get invited, and then listen, to what people talk about, what they're passionate about, and continue to make contribution to those groups. And the third tip I want to give is more about what I call value-added volunteering. So why don't I go back to the slides and try to clarify that some more. And again, keep going with the questions. I love answering questions because I think that makes it more fun and make the session more interactive. Okay, so let me go back and wrap up on the... So let me just finish up on the blogging and content creation. So back to my story about Magdalena Yasil. I think another reason that she was willing to connect with me is because, like I said, her book was about empowering women and men in tech and in engineering, right? And so because my students are in tech are in engineering, it kind of makes sense for her to also want to reach out to me. And this is where I would say you need to start building that personal brand in terms of either interacting and contributing to those social media groups, or also blogging or creating content. Like I said, with me, it's the videos or the articles that I share. And by doing that, it's more likely other influencers will find you, right? So that's the point that I want to make there about finding the key influencers and also becoming one yourself. Because the more you become a node, just like Paul Revere's, let's go back. So Paul Revere had all these key nodes, right? If you become one of these nodes, then you can spread the information more easily to your audience too, right? So if somebody like the Magdalena Yasils or the Procter & Gamble's, when they want to look for mom bloggers, or a fashion brand wants to look for a fashion blogger, that's why they find those key influence, right? Because you want to become a node yourself. Okay, so let me go back and talk some more about the social proofing and also becoming a key influencer. And actually, I started on the point about value-added volunteering. And I think that's where, again, either starting out, right, whether you're starting a new career or you're a student, you can really make use of this point in terms of looking for organizations that really need help, and then try to match what you have in terms of special skills, and then try to help them out, whether it's putting together a panel or doing research on a special market that you have some experience with. Or my international students, you have a lot of country knowledge that you can bring in to a lot of companies. So your value-added volunteering can really kind of set you apart, right? So that's where I would say that's the number one thing in terms of bringing value to the people that you are trying to network with. And also the Idea Network, my scientist audience, can really make use of this, right? Publish your paper. Those of you, like I said, whether you can publish blogs or LinkedIn articles or contribute to be very active in a Facebook group, or Quora is another one where you can contribute ideas and answers, then you can become better known or maybe even, a recognized expert. And another value added thing I would say is that I know coming up in June, end of June, there's a big startup week that's kicking off in San Diego. So those kind of events always need a lot of speakers and a lot of panelists and a lot of moderators. So again, if you can look for ways to join in on an event like that, or better yet, develop your own event where you get to invite the speakers and you get to, invite those panelists, then you become the person, right, that will get to know all the different people. Although that's a lot more work, but I'm sure there are ways to do that in a small scale also, especially at UCSD. I think there's so many student clubs, and also there are many local incubators in town where they're always looking to do an event. They're always looking to add panelists to their talks. So there are definitely ways that you can contribute and volunteer, and again, meet more people that way. So earlier I had a question about people who are introverts, right? People who are introverts, how do they go about, developing that strategic network? And this is where I think that value-added volunteering can really be helpful to the introverts amongst us, because as you're working and putting together the panel or organizing events, I don't think it'd be like interacting with strangers, right? Because people come to you. If you're the organizer, or if you're the panelist, or if you're the speaker, then people actually come to you, right? To ask you about, the topic that you just talked about, or to ask you about some of the panelists that are at the event. Or you get to know other people who tends to know some of these panelists and speakers and specialists and experts. So that would be one way for an introvert to gain value and to start developing network. Like I said, back to the value-added volunteering. And also, I mentioned earlier, right? If you become an influencer yourself by developing your own followers, or, leading a club, or developing some of those hobbies, like I said, that entrepreneurs, tend to congregate towards, that might be another way too, where you can find some of these other entrepreneurs or key influencers that you need to get to know. Okay, let me get through a couple more slides and we'll take another question break. So the tips about nurturing your network. So these tips are tried and true, because I've used them myself time and time again. And I know a lot of my students, when they think about, oh, I want to go work at Intel, or I want to go work at Illumina, if they meet somebody from Intel, Illumina, that's the first thing they bring up. And I would say that's a timeout. That you should think about how you can be of service first. And so my mantra to all my students is to pay it forward, that before you ask somebody for something, make sure that you actually give before you receive. So if I'm meeting somebody for the first time from Intel or from Illumina, the first thing I'm not going to ask them is about getting a job. But what I do want to have the conversation I do want to have with them is more on a personal level. Like, what do they do? Do they enjoy about what they do? What's the company like? Just more information about the person. And then to think about how I can be of service, right? So again, if you're a student or if you're an entrepreneur, what you can usually do is offer to give feedback, or maybe even offer to make introductions. So like I said, if you're a good listener, you can usually pick up on something that they really are passionate about, or if there's something that's really, taking up their time. And you can ask a lot of these open-ended questions. So I've done this in my launch.bio talk, where you should come up with some good follow-up questions when you're at networking events, not just about pitching yourself, but also to think about good questions to ask when you're meeting somebody for the first time. And one of the good ones I've heard about is like, what are you passionate about? Or what's the project that you're working at that's, what's something that's really taking up a lot of your time? Or what's keeping you up awake at night? So all those kind of open-ended questions might lead you to some more information about that person. And then, like I said, you can offer to give them feedback, and you can definitely offer to make introductions. Okay, so those are the tips. Okay, so let me go back to the video and answer some of these questions that are coming through. Let's go back. Okay, so it looks like I got a couple more questions. So mentoring, well, that's another topic I've gotten on recently. I actually met with this company called Everwise, where they're trying to really systematically look at how mentoring is done and how mentors and mentees are matched up. And there's definitely ways to think about that. I think when I connected with Magdalena Yesio, I wasn't necessarily looking for a mentor, but I was definitely, like I said, thinking of how I can be of service, because like I said, her ideas really resonated with me, but I was trying to think of a way to help her spread that idea, right? And so with mentors, I would say, again, look for give and take relationships. So not just people that can really help train you or help you learn a new field, but also think of ways that you can give back to that person. So I think, whether that's starting a new field, you might need a person to help you, coach you through some of what are the new things about that field. So that would be top of my list, right? Some of the new things I need to learn. And then also just doing the SWOT analysis. I have this in the personal branding class that I host on KaizenThinkIfic.com. That part of doing personal branding is to look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what are some of those weaknesses or threats? So in your last career, were there things that kind of always got in your way? Or as an entrepreneur, are there things that you keep coming up against, right? Is that financially, or is it people problems? What are some of the things that keep cropping up? And then again, maybe using LinkedIn to see people who are good at this, or definitely I like to use the word of mouth network. Like, who do you know that is a person that, is strong in that weakness part that I really need help with? And there's also nothing wrong with finding a coach, because I think a coach is also somebody who can not necessarily mentor you, but more sort of keeping you on track, right? So let's say it's a career coach. You want to switch your career within 2 years. That career coach can check in with you, whether that's monthly or you've developed a plan together. And then you think about, hey, have I made progress towards some of those milestones? And they're just really people, like think about an athletic coach, right? A lot of the top players, they don't need the coach to tell them exactly what to do, but it's more somebody who can bounce ideas off and give you strategy. So I would say the same about mentors, that if you're in a field where you already have the skills, it could be that it's just somebody that can be a sounding board, or somebody, like I said, that you can have that give and take relationship with. Okay, let me answer another one. So how do I stay in touch with people who used to be in your network, but then you stop interacting with them? So yeah, so if you had an internship, but you want to stay in touch. So this is where LinkedIn is helpful, because I haven't been at IBM for 20 years now. But amazingly, when I reach back and ping some of the managers that I used to work with, and this is definitely the case where if you're, you have a good track record and people remember your work, that connection can be very easily done. But if most of the people are gone and you want to still get to know either a manager or somebody to give you a reference, what I would recommend is always make friends with the HR people, because I do have a good friend who happens to be in HR. And amazingly, through all of my different jobs, she's been able to be my reference, right? And so, not like I said, the wide and far network, get to know people in HR, but also through LinkedIn, you can find where some of your old connections are. And again, look at their posts, right? Look at some of the things that they're active in or passionate about, or comment on their post. These would be all ways that you can kind of reconnect with that person. And then once you establish a rapport again, then you ask for what you need, right? So I think, to me, it's always important to do some of that rapport building. Okay, hopefully I've answered that sufficiently. If you have more, we'll make sure to take another question break. So we're at 8:41. I'll try to wrap up on the networking piece, and then we'll go into more questions. Okay, so let me switch back. Thank you, everybody. I really enjoy the questions, and I think that's what's great about the webinar format, because in the recording, you don't get the live interaction. So I do appreciate that, and I hope you're enjoying it too. Okay, so this chart, I have to apologize. Normally, it would have been a longer vertical chart, but since I use the landscape format in my PowerPoint, this is unfortunately the way it looks. And this is what's called the Leader Network Diagnostic. So I'm going to give you the link at the end of the presentation. This is done by Center for Creative Leadership. And basically, it's a way to look at how to map out your network, right? Just like the node that we saw in the Paul Revere example. So real quick, you can write up to 16 people. In my case, I think I only came up with 12. So you're basically thinking of the 16 people who are most important to you in your professional network, right? So it could be from your operational, it could be from your personal, and it definitely could be from your strategic. So all of these people who are really important to you that you've had direct contact in the last 6 months, right? So there are people that give you information and resources, or they help you solve complex problem at work or in your organization, or they provide you with either developmental advice or support, or they come from inside or outside the organization you're active in. And it could, and so definitely the key criteria here is that you want to make sure that people graph in this chart are people that you can't really easily replace if they're not in your network, right? So they're really critical part of your professional network. And so when I did this exercise, so in the lower part of the chart, you can kind of see the examples of the different types of network. And like we saw earlier, the Paul Revere example is very open, and that's kind of the ideal. So in my case, I actually had something that was too open because of my different careers and the different types of audience I work with. Students, entrepreneurs, people at IBM, people at Monsanto, and also Harvard Business Publishing. All of those network nodes didn't know each other. So mine was in fact too open. But I'd say for a lot of people that are just starting out, most likely your network would look more like William Dawes. It'll be a lot of people that know each other. And so that's why in strategic networking, you want to start getting to these outer nodes. You want to start building people in finance, people in HR, people in different companies, people that are not normally in your field of work, but they're very good advisors, and they have very good connections with the field that they're active in. And I think that's kind of what this chart is getting at. Your strategic network should have these very important nodes that then can spread to another field or spread to a whole another group, right? So, like I said, in the end of the slide deck, I'll have the links to all these resources. And in fact, there's even a YouTube on how to fill out one of these charts. But I'm pretty sure you should be able to just kind of think through who all your key contacts are, and then do some of these network diagnostic yourself. Okay, so let me go back to taking some questions on this. So that was the CCL, Creative Center of Leadership's Leader Network Diagnostic. And I think the idea is more, again, just like what we do with SWOT analysis, to kind of do an assessment of what our current network looks like, right? So whether I have a lot of people in a specific field, or I have a lot of people from the same alumni university institution, or I have a lot of people from the same hobby that I, am active in. I think with strategic networking, what you're trying to do is develop, a contact here that can give you some of those financial contacts, and then have another node, I should call it node. So have a node that gets you into financial contacts. Have another node to get me into HR contacts. Maybe another one to get me into my university alumni. Or if it's back at UCSD, somebody like Mindy or Fiona could be good influencers to be in touch with. So they can always put you back in touch with teachers or alumni that's come through the program. And yeah, anything else you can think of. Sometimes, like I said, it could be somebody at your gym, or obviously in the old ways, the country clubs where a lot of people develop these far and wide networks too, right? So there are many ways to go about it. But once you do the network diagnostic, maybe that can get you started in thinking about where I need to develop more contacts, or my network's too closed. So to think more strategically again about how to branch out, or have the people in your current network make introductions. And that's back to David Burkus's point that, yeah, of course, we all start out with closed network of one form or another, but hopefully by making those introductions, or in my case, it was through exchanging ideas or becoming an influencer yourself, then people can come to you because you're the expert in a certain field. And then you'll become the person that will be another node to somebody else's network, right? So that's all part of it. That first you think about strategically how you want to build out your network. And hopefully you're also still building your own network so that you'll become a key influencer yourself. And that's more likely for other key influencers to want to join forces with you. Okay, are there more questions I can answer on that, on the network diagnostic? Take a little water break. Okay, so let me go back so I can try to finish on time with you guys. Okay, so that's the network diagnostic. And to wrap up, okay, so I'm not going to get to the personal branding, but what I like to do, let me see, I think we, the personal branding, I think I've given that to most of you previously, but I do want to get to this additional resources page. So as I said, if you're interested in the personal branding piece, I definitely have a class that's already set up there on Thinkific. So it's Kaizen, as in the continuous improvement Kaizen, .thinkific with an I, thinkific.com. So Thinkific is the platform I use. So instead of Blackboard, I have a more up-to-date learning management system there. And also the CCL Leadership Network Diagnostic Tool. I'll show you what that looks like. It's actually 6 pages, I want to say. Let's see if I can get that to show up here. Yeah, so this is the network diagnostic tool. So this looks better, right? This is the long form. So in this case, you identify who's in your network. And then you start looking at the scoring too. You're scoring yourself in terms of how open or closed it is by looking at all the different contacts you put in. And again, the ideal network is where you have diverse groups and you also have deep connections, right? And yeah, so first you start out with what you have. So your current state would be on this step 3. And then think more strategic about some additional areas that you want to grow the contact. And like I said, maybe make use of that David Burkus method of getting introductions, or like I said, comment on people's work, or joining the groups where you can become more of a recognized expert, or become somebody's fan. I think that's more the method I use with Magdalena Yosio. Becoming a fan can also be a way you can make connection. And then here's some key questions too, right? So is there a boundary area where I need to create new relationship? Is there an introduction I can make that could benefit the people that I work with so that can help you grow your network? Number 3, is there a relationship that I can invest in and strengthen? Or number 4, is there a relationship I can transition from an active state to more latent because it's no longer as beneficial to me? So I hope this resource will be very helpful to you. And like I said, I have the link right here for the CCL leader. And there's even, you can just look up the CCL leader network tool. I believe you can find a YouTube on that too. And as I said, David Burkus's book, Friend of a Friend, there's even an audio podcast I think you can sign up for, which is pretty helpful on that front, how to write these emails or how to say or ask the right questions to get to know people better when you're networking. And I'd say the bulk of today's slide was really the genesis from the start of a view when I think about how LinkedIn's founder, right, basically thought of the social network as a way to develop that strategic network. Although I like that question earlier about how is LinkedIn a strategic network? And I would say not quite. I think ideally that's what Reid Hoffman thought it could be, but I'd say it's just a component of your network. So I'd say LinkedIn is good for organizing. So for example, the newsletter I put together, I was able to do that through cultivating my LinkedIn contacts. Or it could be a publishing platform like I do with my videos. But really, I think what you can take away from today's talk is that, other than just developing your brand, which I've talked about in class already, I think you should also think about who it is that you want to be introduced to or have a deep connection with so that your brand and your company can be visible to those important people, right? And so I think the startup of you is to think about you, the person, as a brand. And then obviously those of you that are entrepreneurs, your brand is your company. So the startup of you is your brand, and the startup of you is also your company. And I also have one additional link to sign on to the newsletter to get the webinar deck. But actually, I think earlier we posted the webinar deck link right into the YouTube, so you can check in after I finish editing the video. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. Can I answer any more questions or go through any more slides and more, in more details for you? Oh, so networking events appropriate for students. Definitely UCSD has a lot. I go to a lot of Connect events. So Connect actually used to be part of UCSD. And Connect basically is what's called an incubator where companies, entrepreneurs, mentors all come together. And I did some training for Connect on lean startup and lean methodology. And I think Connect is a good student resource because the events are always open to everybody. And there's either training or there's even like office hours with lawyers. There are also consulting firms that give training on various topics on investing and how to get funding. So I think actually Connect will be very appropriate for students and for entrepreneurs. And another so I mentioned the Startup San Diego. I think that's also very appropriate because I think they definitely have a student discount there. It's very reasonable, like $35 to go to all 5 days worth of events. And don't forget, online, there are a lot of webinars that are given. And as you see today, our webinars have a very small, intimate audience. And so if there is an influencer that you're interested in and they're giving a webinar, I think that's a good way to connect with them because especially if you're very active and stay in touch and like I said, become a fan, become a super fan is also a good way to become connected with somebody who's a key influencer. Okay, so here's another question about, so let me go back to the video. Are there blogs that I can talk to you about? So let me go back to switching the video on. Blogs about network and branding. I'll have to think about that and get back to you because off the top of my head, there's almost overload. There's so many blogs and websites and people that do all of that. So I would say I don't have just one source. I probably have to think about it and try to repost it in one of my LinkedIn articles to talk more about that, about how I get my ideas about networking and branding. So yeah, I'll make sure that that's written. So that's a to-do for me to post that later. Blogging, blogs. or networking resource. Okay, and any others? Let me have a look. I like the question too about, I talked about, again, for a lot of international students, it's probably somewhat kind of a cultural stumbling block to kind of, be out there introducing yourself and giving your personal pitch and do it in a very comfortable way. And so I think I've given this tip in class that, especially with women, go as a group, go in a pair or go as a group, because I know a lot of women are very comfortable talking about themselves. Or, if you're an international student, right? That we come from, some of us come from cultures that you're meant to be very humble and that you're not supposed to brag, right? But what I would say is that when you go as a pair, then, you can introduce yourself, but you don't have to say, oh, well, I did this, or I grew this, or I'm doing this. Your friend can do that for you, right? Especially your best friend. So if you go to a networking event where you're going as a pair or even threes or fours, it's probably more comfortable for you that you already have some friends surrounding you, but you can also use the opportunity to talk up your friend, right? So I think that's another networking tip I would give you guys, that those of you that are more introverted, or those of you that come from an international cultural background where it's not as comfortable talking about yourself, that you bring a friend and then can, probably feel more comfortable interacting with other people. And also, you don't have to talk up yourself as much. You can talk about your friend, right? So that'll feel less uncomfortable, I want to say. And hopefully over time, you'll learn how to talk about yourself, when you're on your own. But I think starting out, definitely as students, and I'd say those of you that are entrepreneurs, definitely go with your entrepreneur friends, because, they can talk up your company and you could talk up their companies too, right? So I'd say the pairing off actually could be a very good way to do it. Okay, well, we are at 9 o'clock. I'm happy to stay on and take some more questions as you have them. But yeah, I will send out the recording. I think well, we won't be able to post it in a chat, but I'll probably either just do it on the Facebook post or do it via the LinkedIn that's already gone out, because I think I just put it into a comment. But yeah, you can always feel free to follow up with me with some of the resources I share with you today. So whether that's the link, the slide deck, or the recording, or the CCL diagnostic tool, I'm happy to answer some more about that. But yeah, if you want to continue to chat in, I'm happy to stay on for another 5-10 minutes. Any good books about the topic? So do you mean networking? So like I said, the David Burkus book is a good one about getting introductions. The CCL one is a good one to do that diagnostic. And I think actually CCL, the Creative Center for Leadership, also has a lot of resources and articles about networking and about, the basic mentoring type issues also. Everwise, I mentioned that earlier. Everwise is another mentoring company that I've talked to. And so I think they also have some mentoring resources available. Definitely, I think some of the articles I've used are from Harvard Business Publishing. So I'll make sure to capture that too. I did have that originally in my additional resources, networking articles that are from Harvard Business Review. Okay. But yeah, I'll try to post that or put that into the webinar deck when I post it. Okay. Anything else? And again, thanks you guys, those of you that stayed in from the very beginning. I appreciate you spending the hour with me. And yeah, I can definitely go on and on about this topic. And in the slide deck, I actually did include some of the personal branding topics. So if there's some questions there, I can also answer that as well. Just that I knew today was more about strategic networking, so I didn't talk as much about personal branding, but I can always answer more questions about that too. I know I introduced the topic in class. Okay, so Kat, you have one more question? Just a sec, let me see. Okay. But yeah, there are a lot of networking articles, although, like I said, there's so many resources out there. I'll have to go back and look at maybe one or two that I would recommend to you guys. So I'm going to make sure to include that in the webinar deck on that last page called additional resources. So I'll make sure to include that when I do update it, and then share that with my LinkedIn group and also with the email. Okay, looks like the questions coming in. So I've attended some networking events in San Diego. The challenge is that they're largely related to potential contacts not taking me seriously. Oh, because I'm an international student. Yeah, I have to think about that, because like I said, you kind of have to play up your strengths. And it is tough. It is tough as an international student. But I will have to say that a lot of you come with a lot of you, and I don't mean just the people in this webinar. I'd say most of the international students that come through my classes, you all already have really good working experiences, and you also have really good country knowledge. And so I think that's some of the things that you can really emphasize and try to build on when you meet some of these people. So when you tell them what country you're from, it might be helpful to tell them about, did you know that my country, is the biggest export in X? Or did you know that so-and-so company does a lot of training in, this company that I used to work with? Or did you know that, San Diego has a sister relationship with this and that city in Japan, right? And so I think those are ways you can build some of those bridges to these people that are in a field that you're not familiar with, or they're not familiar with you, right? And I say, even for me, I usually try to listen first. I think I usually try to introduce myself, but maybe you don't always have to bring up the student piece, but you can say that you're here for your certificate, or you're here for a certificate program, and that you're looking for opportunities in San Diego. You don't always have to emphasize the student part, but definitely emphasize your professional knowledge. And like I said, some of those country knowledge that somebody here would not have, right? So in my case, because I spent a lot of time working in China and Taiwan, if I do meet people that tend to export to Taiwan or export to China, that's where I can strike up a conversation with them. And like I said, there might be specific company skills or professional knowledge that you can build on too, right? So, you can say, hey, I used to work at so-and-so company, but I'm here to get my postgraduate degree. So maybe that's an easier way to say it versus just saying international student. So that would be my advice. So yeah, so that's basically what I would say, that you are here to pursue your postgraduate degree, and that your former field or whatever new field that you're looking for is where you want to continue to look for opportunities. So I'd say a little bit more future looking versus backwards looking. So present yourself as somebody that you are working towards becoming, right? So I'm here, so even before I was an MBA, I would always tell people I'm here to pursue my MBA. Or previously I worked at IBM, but now I'm interested in business development in China, right? So give some of those future looking statements too, I think could be helpful. Okay, I do want to wrap up. I don't want to keep anybody up too late. But thanks so much for joining me. I will be sending out the link to the recording. And you can always follow up with me with additional questions too. Like I said, either to get the deck to figure out more about that CCL diagnostic. And then, like I said, I'll try to find some of those additional books or resources on the questions that you asked. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your help so much. Thanks for joining me again. Bye.